Hey everyone, welcome back to another Easter egg and theory video for WandaVision, and this is going to be for episode 6. So this show just keeps getting better and better. Of course, in the last episode we had the shocking end with Wanda's brother Pietro returning from the dead, but looking like Fox's Quicksilver. Obviously, we don't know for sure still what is going on with that situation, but there certainly are some clues from this episode that I will be talking about. We also have that moment when Vision breaks the barrier and the boys get their powers this episode. In this episode, we step into Malcolm in the Middle vibe. The opening title sequence makes it super obvious. Tommy excitedly running through the house, filming everyone. He catches Wanda in the bathroom, Vision reading the newspaper, Agnes with her naughty rhinestone pants in the kitchen, just further emphasis that she's probably not a good person. And then we also have Billy. Of course, Pietro, who is the typical cool 90s uncle. The time code here, I think, is a reference to Avengers Volume 1, Issue 48, issue where Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch are both held captive by Magneto. I obviously don't think that's the case here, but I do think that it's just a representation of Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, and their parentage. I do think, though, that the music here really explains what's going on. I think that the music for these openings really just give a good sense of what not only this episode is about, but about the series in general. So this one says, don't fight the chaos, don't question what you've done. Obviously, Wanda, something's telling her not to even question what she's doing. There's nothing wrong with it, even though Vision has kind of been pushing her to see that this isn't okay. Then it says, the game can try to play us, don't let us stop the fun. Some days it's all confusion, easy come and easy go, but if it's all illusion, sit back, enjoy the show, let's keep it going through each distorted day. Let's keep it going, though there may be no way of knowing who's coming by to play. So obviously something wants her to stay in this bubble hex and keep things going, even if it's wrong. So I do think that's where we're at. I think Vision is kind of pushing Wanda to question what she's doing here, even though she doesn't want to end it, because as we learned in this episode, that will also end Vision. But something wants her here to stay. I definitely think that person is Pietro, or whoever this person is. It did also mention surprise guests. You never know who's going to come by to play. I mean, that could be for Pietro, or we could be seeing someone else soon. Billy is excited for Halloween, dressed just like his suit in the comics. Billy's specific introduction is that Halloween is a magical holiday all about family, friends, and the thrill that you get to be someone else for a day. A nod to the fact that someone is playing at being Quicksilver, or that this is just the Halloween episode. Notice the tiger slippers in the cutaway scene. Last episode, there were tigers everywhere as well, so these are obviously a clue to something. I don't know what. There seems to be an overall arcing predator theme, so that could be what they signify, because we talk about vampires. The commercial this episode is sharks, so it could just be that we have a predator theme. It also seems like Billy may be scared of Pietro. At this point, they do not have powers, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't have a heightened sense of intuition at the onset of getting his telepathic powers. Tommy mentions Billy is scared because he thinks that Pietro is a vampire. I thought this was a funny comparison, like he's a man that comes back to life to suck the life force out of somebody. Reminds me a little bit of the commercial this episode with the shark. So obviously something's going on, and I want to talk about the commercial separately, but I do think that this is a reference to him being here and kind of sucking their powers from them. Wanda then joins the party in her comic book inspired Halloween costume she says is a Sokovian fortune teller. Pietro deems this as lame and reminds her of the year that they got typhus. Wanda, though, says that's not how she remembers it. Obviously, the scene was meant to be a joke, but it kind of puts her in a suspicious way, because in the show it's a joke, but to her, he's actually saying this to her, so it doesn't make sense to her. There are other moments like this where she kind of questions him or questions whether or not this is her brother, but we'll talk about those as they come up. While talking to the screen in the Malcolm in the Middle style, Billy mentions that Wanda has been different and weird since Pietro showed up. They write this off to him being a man-child, but like I just said, I do think that she's suspicious on how he got here, why he looks different, and what is really going on. Vision comes down dressed in a homemade version of his comic costume, which Pietro also makes fun of. We are getting the impression that Vision doesn't really care for Wanda's newly emerged brother, and even Wanda admits that he has been full of surprises, and I don't think she means that in a good way. Vision is preoccupied with all the weird things that have been happening around Westview. Instead of spending the night with the family and going trick-or-treating, he is instead going to look around town for other clues under the guise that he will be working with the neighborhood watch. Billy again notes for the audience that things have been off between Wanda and Vision. Pietro hears this interaction with Billy and the camera. It steps in to smooth things with Wanda and Vision, claiming he can be the positive role model for the night. It seems to me that he's just kind of trying to push Vision out so he can kind of take over the situation, because like I've mentioned a couple times now, Vision is starting to make Wanda question what she's doing here, while Pietro wants to make her feel comfortable with what she's doing here. When Vision leaves, he gives Wanda a firm "be good," but you can tell that she's disappointed that he's not spending this time with them. I think the moment when Pietro scares Wanda was weird, but I'm not really sure like where that was headed. It could be like another he's sneaking up behind you reference, like Predators type of thing. I don't know, but I guess we'll see. In preparation for the night of trick-or-treating, Pietro and Tommy get their matching costumes together, along with planning to fill water balloons with shaving cream. The moment when Wanda says, "If I see any funny business, I'm going to magic you into a pickled herring." I think that this was pretty telling. It implies that Pietro is already a red herring, something that is or is intended to be misleading or distracting for either her or us. It's obvious that he's not who he says he is, and he's here just as a distraction. Meanwhile, things are getting pretty hostile on the outside. One thing I didn't notice from the last episode is that the drone they sent in to talk with Wanda and attack her was Stark Tech, which only makes me wonder about my theory with S.W.O.R.D. acquiring all the technology from Avengers Tower after the battle in Endgame. I talked more about this in my last video, which I'll link below. This is also something that would have triggered Wanda pulling from her past trauma of losing her parents. Hayward here then mentions that this is a nightmare, which could be a reference to the demon nightmare who feeds off people while they're asleep. Some people think that this could be the main villain of both this show and Doctor Strange. I'm not totally sold on that. I'm leaning more towards Mephisto, but it is worth mentioning. Darcy then makes a joke or comment about Hayward almost getting killed by his own men, and Hayward is not laughing, even openly wondering if she works for him. Monica not only steps in, but calls Hayward out for his aggressive tactics towards Wanda. However, Hayward is not backing down. He not only pulls the Captain Marvel card, calling Monica's history with powered people, but that she is oversympathetic towards them. He then goes even lower in saying that he's glad that she wasn't here when her mother died, because it's obvious that she doesn't have the stomach for this job, which was a very low blow. He then has them removed from the base. Of course, these three are not going down without a fight. Jimmy and Monica fight off the guard, and the three of them find a location to plan. Darcy uses this time to hack into the server to get whatever information they can, or whatever information she thinks that Hayward is hiding. While trick-or-treating, this gives Wanda the perfect opportunity to talk with Pietro, and even brings up a boy they knew growing up. He calls her out on testing him, but also doesn't answer the question. They then talk about this obvious difference in appearance, which neither one of them can explain. He puts it on her not wanting to deal with past trauma. I also find it interesting that he called the kids demon spawns, an obvious reference to their origin in the comics, with the Mephisto literally being part of Mephisto's essence. So I do think that that was a call to Mephisto. The moment with Herb was pretty telling for Wanda. The kids and Pietro are running around stealing candy, smashing pumpkins, and covering everyone in silly string, while Herb gets the neighborhood watch reports. The Kick-Ass reference was a reference to the Kick-Ass movie, which starred both Evan Peters and Aaron Taylor Johnson. Speaking of neighborhood watch, Herb tells Wanda that Vision is not only on duty tonight. Herb asks her if there's anything he can do or change in a way that everyone else kind of steps around Wanda. Like she's in control, but he's willing to do anything she asks. He's kind of walking on eggshells around her. And Herb has always seemed a little more aware than everyone else about what's really happening here. So I'm curious about that. With Vision, he's walking the neighborhood, but instead of looking for troubled teens, he is looking for things out of place that can explain what's going on in Westview. We see the scene with the woman from the trailer doing the repetitive hanging like she's stuck, but now we see the tears slide down her face. Obviously, like Norm was, she's in a lot of emotional pain. Then to this commercial. So the commercial was a 90s style claymation commercial for yogurt. However, this time it seems less centered around Wanda, and I think actually more centered around Billy. I think the red shirt here implies that it could be a representation of him. He's on a desert island, which I think is representing the hex, and he's starving. Then a shark or predator comes in and offers him a snack of yogurt. The shark says that he knows what being hungry is like. He used to be like that all the time. So like this shark was somewhere starving all the time. When Billy asked, "What did you do?" he said, "I snacked on yo magic." So obviously the shark is feeding off of their magic. Obviously there's some predator that is planning to snack and drain Billy's powers until he's dead. According to the rising and setting of the sun here, it takes about 8 days. I don't know if that's going to be significant, but I did count. This is definitely foreshadowing of what is likely going to happen to Billy or what some outside force is planning to do for him. Back with Wanda and Pietro, they begin talking about him being a bad influence, but he claims that he's just playing his part. He's supposed to show up unexpectedly, create tension with Vision, stir up trouble with the kids, and ultimately give Wanda grief. I think this is the exact goal, is to make the kids troublemakers, push Wanda away so he can better control Wanda and then use Wanda's grief against her. He acts like this is what she wants, like he's under her control, but I think it's pretty obvious that he's not. I think that these were directions either given to him by an outside force or his actual intentions, since this isn't really her brother. Wanda then questions why Pietro doesn't have an accent, but he counters with the same question. It's a fair point, and neither one of them answer. For him, he says the details are fuzzy. He says he only remembers that he was shot and then that she was calling to him, that she in some way needed him. I think he's purposely misleading, kind of filling in the place that Agnes typically takes. Behind them was The Incredibles and Parent Trap on the theater sign. Not only were these both movies in the 90s and Disney movies, one is about a superpowered family, which is what's happening in the show, and then the other ones are about twins that can change positions, which I think is a reference to Pietro kind of swapping or giving us the impression that they've swapped spots. Tommy and Billy then jump into the conversation with their excitement over full-size candy bars, and Tommy reveals that he now has super speed. Wanda willingly lets the boys run off with Tommy's new super speed as long as they don't pass Ellis Avenue. With Monica, Jimmy, and Darcy, Darcy has worked to hack SWORD, specifically looking for something that Hayward is keeping a secret. The first discovery is that Hayward is tracking Vision. He is using the signature of decaying vibranium. This makes it clear that for the most part, Hayward cares only about getting Vision back. They even call him an asset in the search. So this is not about Wanda. It's not about the people in the neighborhood. It's all about getting his hands on Vision. Monica then gets a message from her aerospace engineer with a plan to meet up somewhere close. However, before she leaves, Darcy warns her that she cannot go back into the hex after finding her medical files. Apparently, going in and out of this hex has changed her on a molecular level, altering her DNA. I think when she hears this, she's thinking cancer like her mother, but I don't think she understands that she's getting powers. The tests do show that whatever is happening, they do not understand, because it does say inconclusive. If it were cancer, they would have easily been able to see that this was cancer, so it's obviously something different. Darcy decides to stay behind to get something big on Hayward, what this big secret he's keeping, while Jimmy and Monica leave to meet with her friend. Vision is still walking around trying to grasp what is happening, and eventually he ditches the costume and flies up to see what's happening. This is when he spots the car on Ellis Drive, the point in which Wanda told the boys they could not pass earlier in the episode. In the car is a scene that we've seen from the trailer with Agnes. She seems like she's kind of like the others, but she's also able to speak and kind of move a little, where the others were basically frozen. So either her powers allow her to not quite go under as much into like this frozen area, or she's just faking it. She claims that she's taken a wrong turn and got lost with tears in her eyes, prompting Vision to wake her like he did Norm in the previous episode. Before I get into that, I do think that she feels she has messed up in some way. In my last video, I theorized that Agnes's goal was to trick the boys into aging up and used Sparky to do that. When the boys didn't age up that third time, she kind of failed her mission, which prompted the insertion of Pietro, who I think is the big bad disguised or under control by the big bad. So I do think she was trying to get out or escape her boss's wrath, maybe. Or this could have been employed just to separate Vision from Wanda now that he's not placating her and actually making her aware of what's happening is wrong. While Agnes is awake, she calls Vision an Avenger and asks if he's there to help. He does admit that he's there to help, but he doesn't know what an Avenger is. We learned in the last episode that he doesn't remember his time before Westview. And then Agnes asks if she herself is dead, and Vision's pretty confused by that. And then when he says why, she reveals that Vision's dead and then repeats it 3 times before Vision puts her back into the show's reality. Agnes then turns around and heads back to town with Vision heading towards the barrier. Then we're back with Pietro and Wanda again, and yet another Mephisto reference when Pietro says that Westview is just charming as hell. Like, they're everywhere. Either they're trying to totally confuse us, or this is Mephisto. That's the only 2 options. He then gets into talking about their mom and dad before he asks her where she has been keeping the children. We know in the last episode that Vision mentioned that there haven't been any other children. She never answers where the kids came from, but does think it's weird that Pietro doesn't think all of this is wrong. Like I mentioned a couple times now, Vision has been really making Wanda question, and Pietro's like, nah, it's cool, let's just keep it going, like the line from the title sequence. Pietro says that he is impressed and points out the big difference between giving people nightmares and trapping them into a sitcom reality. He does want to know how she did all this, and again, she says she has no idea. However, this time she does elaborate a little more and says that all she remembers is feeling completely alone and empty. We do have another creepy dead person scene when Wanda looks over at Pietro and he looks to be dead, but I don't think that this is actually like something she's seeing. I think it's a vision he's causing her to see. On the outside with Darcy, we're back out there. She's been able to access a file called Cataract, which I think is the operation or mission code for the project with Vision, a play on words for an eye disease that reduces your vision. This is also clearly a weapons program. Luckily, she sends this information over to Jimmy Woo right now because Darcy's going to be in a little bit of trouble here in a second. Then we're to the moment where Vision breaches the border. We knew from the trailers that this was going to happen, but we didn't know what was going to happen to Vision when he crossed the bubble. Well, now we know. He's going to decay. He literally starts melting away with the fake reality being sucked back into the hex, leaving Vision's lifeless body. I seriously cannot watch Vision die again. Darcy does attempt to jump in and convince them to save him, only causing her to get handcuffed to one of the vehicles there. This is when we learn that Billy has developed his powers. Like Wanda, he's a telepath and can actually hear the screams of Vision and the others on the outside of the hex. Like Wanda did to Billy earlier, he reaches out and stops Tommy, and then they run to get Wanda to let her know what is happening with Vision. Pietro basically tells her not to worry. It's not like he can die twice, but he has died twice, but I guess this is the 3rd time. This comment does earn him some magic right to the gut though. And just real quick, this tombstone here is the name of one of the assistant directors for the show. And then, back into this, Wanda then has Tommy focus so she can hone in on where he is seeing Vision. He tells her he sees soldiers and that Vision is dying and that he's outside of the perimeter. She then uses her powers to stop everything in Westview and expand this hex. We then watch as the hex expands, engulfing Darcy and the entire Sword base. They do show that Vision's body is restored and most everything else turns into the circus. The only person they don't give us an idea of was Darcy. Hayward and a few people in his vehicle with him are able to escape, and then Monica and Jimmy also outrun the hex as well. And that's where we ended, so that's all I have for you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and give it a like. If you have anything you want to talk about, leave a comment and I will be sure to respond. If you want to hear more of my overall Marvel breakdowns and news, check out my podcast. You can find me on Apple, Google, or Spotify under Mayday Maggie. And then I post daily on my blog at www.maydaymaggie.com.